War. It is a specter that has haunted humanity since our earliest days. From primitive conflicts over resources to global wars that reshaped civilizations, the story of our species is intertwined with the narrative of conflict. Yet, even as we strive for peace, the seeds of discord are often sown in the very triumphs of diplomacy. The Cold War, a global standoff between superpowers, ended decades ago, but the anxieties of that era never truly faded. They lingered, like embers beneath ash, waiting for the right conditions to ignite. In 2040, those embers found their spark. The world, a tinderbox of geopolitical tension, erupted. World War III had begun. This was not a war declared with trumpets and grand pronouncements. It began quietly, insidiously in the digital corridors of cyberspace. The opening salvos were not bullets and bombs, but bits and bytes, yet their impact was no less devastating. The world of 2040 was one on the precipice. A delicate balance of power teetered on the edge, with every nation watching and waiting, uncertain of what the future held. Decades of relative peace had masked simmering tensions. Diplomatic smiles and handshakes could no longer hide the underlying fractures that threatened to break the world apart. The United States, still a superpower, found its dominance challenged by a rising China. The two giants, locked in a strategic dance, eyed each other warily, each move calculated and deliberate. Russia, seeking to reclaim its former glory, flexed its military muscles on the world stage. Its ambitions were clear and its actions spoke louder than words, sending ripples of unease across the globe. The European Union, grappling with internal divisions, struggled to maintain its unity. Political infighting and economic disparities threatened to unravel the fabric of the once strong alliance. Economic interdependence, once touted as a guarantor of peace, had morphed into a double-edged sword. The intricate web of global trade became a battleground, with nations vying for control and supremacy. Global trade wars erupted over resources and technological supremacy. Nations imposed tariffs and sanctions, each move escalating tensions and pushing the world closer to the brink. Cyber espionage became commonplace, a silent battle waged in the digital shadows. Nations invested heavily in cyber defenses, knowing that the next war could be fought not on the battlefield, but in the virtual realm. Territorial disputes, long dormant, flared anew. Old wounds were reopened and new conflicts emerged, as nations sought to expand their influence and secure their borders. The South China Sea, rich in resources and trade routes, became a flashpoint. Nations staked their claims, and the waters grew increasingly crowded with military vessels, each one a potential spark for conflict. The Arctic, thawing due to climate change, opened up new shipping lanes and ignited competition for control. The race for resources in this once frozen frontier added another layer of complexity to the global power struggle. The world, it seemed, was forgetting the hard lessons of the past. The memories of devastating wars faded, replaced by a dangerous sense of invincibility and a willingness to gamble with peace. Nationalism surged, fueled by economic uncertainty and social unrest. Populist leaders capitalized on fear and division, rallying their nations with promises of greatness and security. The stage was set for a global conflict. All it needed was a spark. The world held its breath, knowing that the slightest misstep could ignite a firestorm that would engulf the entire planet. That spark came not from a miscalculated military maneuver or a diplomatic blunder, but from the shadows of cyberspace. A sophisticated cyber attack, its origins masked by layers of obfuscation, crippled critical infrastructure across multiple nations. Power grids collapsed, plunging cities into darkness. Communication networks went dark, sowing confusion and panic. Financial markets went haywire, wiping away billions in an instant. The attack was swift, devastating, and utterly deniable. Attribution was difficult, but suspicion immediately fell upon the usual suspects: China, Russia, rogue actors. Accusations flew back and forth, each side vehemently denying responsibility while pointing fingers at the others. The attack was not an isolated incident. It was followed by a cascade of similar strikes, each more brazen and destructive than the last. The digital realm, once a source of connection and progress, had become a weaponized battleground. The world teetered on the brink, the drums of war beating ever louder. Section 4, Cybergeddon. The cyber attacks were just the opening salvo in a conflict that rapidly escalated beyond the digital realm. What began as a series of isolated incidents quickly snowballed into a full-scale cyber war affecting every aspect of modern life. From financial systems to critical infrastructure, nothing was spared. Fear and suspicion ran rampant, fueled by misinformation and propaganda. Social media platforms became battlegrounds of their own, where truth and lies were indistinguishable. People were left in a state of constant anxiety, unsure of what to believe or who to trust. Long-standing alliances frayed, as nations retreated into their corners, prioritizing self-preservation over international cooperation. Diplomatic channels that once facilitated dialogue and resolution were now clogged with accusations and counter-accusations. The United States, caught off guard by the ferocity of the initial attacks, scrambled to respond. Military and intelligence agencies worked around the clock to identify the perpetrators and mitigate the damage. The sense of urgency was palpable, as every second counted in this new kind of warfare. The Pentagon, once focused on conventional warfare, found itself grappling with an enemy that operated in the ethereal realm of cyberspace. Traditional strategies and tactics were rendered obsolete, forcing a rapid adaptation to this new form of conflict. Cyber Command, elevated to the status of a unified combatant command in the years prior, became the front line in this new kind of war. Its personnel, trained in the intricacies of cyber warfare, were now the nation's first line of defense against an invisible enemy. China, meanwhile, denied any involvement in the attacks but used the chaos to assert its dominance in the region. Its government officials held press conferences vehemently denying any wrongdoing while simultaneously capitalizing on the global disarray. Its navy, now a formidable force, stepped up patrols in the South China Sea, challenging US naval supremacy. The waters became a flashpoint, with both nations conducting military exercises and showing off their naval prowess. Russia, sensing an opportunity to exploit the escalating tensions, made aggressive moves in Eastern Europe, its forces massing on the borders of NATO allies. The world watched with bated breath as the situation teetered on the brink of a larger, more devastating conflict. The cyber war had set the stage for a geopolitical showdown, the likes of which had never been seen before. Section 5, the fog of war. With each passing day, the situation spiraled further out of control. The streets, once bustling with life, now lay in ruins, echoing the chaos that had engulfed the world. The initial cyber attacks had sown confusion and distrust, making it difficult to distinguish between truth and fabrication. Governments struggled to maintain order as misinformation spread like wildfire. Propaganda machines on all sides churned out a relentless stream of disinformation, further inflaming tensions and pushing the world closer to the brink. Social media platforms became battlegrounds of their own, where truth was the first casualty. Military forces on high alert braced for the inevitable. Soldiers, weary yet resolute, prepared for the worst as they fortified their positions, knowing that any moment could bring the spark that would ignite a larger conflict. NATO invoked Article 5, its collective defense clause, for the first time since its founding. The alliance, built on the promise of mutual defense, now faced its greatest test. American troops deployed to Europe in a desperate bid to deter further Russian aggression. Convoys of military vehicles rolled through the countryside, a stark reminder of the escalating tensions. In the Pacific, US warships shadowed their Chinese counterparts, a tense dance on the high seas with the potential for catastrophic miscalculation. The slightest misstep could lead to an all-out war. The world held its breath, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Leaders from around the globe convened emergency meetings, their faces etched with worry as they grappled with the unfolding crisis. It wouldn't be long in coming. The clock ticked ominously, each second bringing the world closer to an irreversible tipping point. A minor incident in the South China Sea, a collision between a US destroyer and a Chinese fishing vessel, quickly escalated into a full-blown naval confrontation. What began as a simple accident soon spiraled out of control. Shots were fired, ships were sunk, and the world watched in horror as a regional conflict spiraled into a global conflagration. The fog of war had descended, obscuring reason and amplifying fear, leaving humanity to grapple with the devastating consequences of its actions. As Section 6, Fire from the Sky, With the battle lines drawn, the full might of modern warfare was unleashed upon the world. Hypersonic missiles capable of traveling at 5 times the speed of sound streaked across continents, delivering their deadly payloads in the blink of an eye. Stealth bombers, virtually invisible to radar, penetrated enemy airspace, raining down destruction on key military installations. Drones, no longer just the purview of reconnaissance and targeted strikes, took to the skies in swarms. Some, no larger than a bird, carried out surveillance missions, relaying real-time intelligence back to command centers. Others, armed with deadly precision-guided munitions, hunted enemy troops and vehicles with ruthless efficiency. Cyber warfare, once a prelude to conventional conflict, became an integral part of the battlefield. Military networks were compromised, disrupting communications and sowing chaos. Critical infrastructure was targeted, plunging cities into darkness and crippling transportation systems. The line between the virtual and the real, once clear, blurred beyond recognition.